We have an alternate plan. A plan that will not unfairly burden our children and our grandchildren to pay for medical care for people today. Isn't that a better way to go? Thank you very much.
I'm Tom Jenny. I'm the Arizona Director of Americans for Prosperity. What are all you people doing here? You must be here because you heard that the federal government was going to give us some free stuff. Or maybe you're here because you don't believe that the federal government is going to give you anything for free. That's what I believe. All right, here's my 2 minutes. The lobbyists and special interests that are pushing for the expansion of Arizona Medicaid under Obamacare are trying to create a crisis where there is no crisis. They're trying to panic our legislators into passing the expansion. All of the numbers you've heard on the news, the supposed dire fiscal consequences of not doing the expansion, all of those are based upon two assumptions, and those two assumptions are both wrong. First, expansion proponents assume that Arizona must immediately and completely backfill the Prop 204 population by putting back all those people who were dropped off of access for the last 2 years. But the Arizona legislature has no legal obligation whatsoever to backfill the Prop 204 population. That matter has been litigated conclusively. The court determined that the legislature does not have to cover that population unless there's adequate funding, and the court determined that the question of adequate funding is a political question, not a judicial question. Furthermore, the legislature has no moral obligation to the voters to backfill the population. 4 years after they passed Prop 204, the voters of the state declared via Prop 101 that they do not want citizen initiatives to dump unfunded spending mandates on the legislature. Second, expansion proponents assume that the Federal Department of Health and Human Services is somehow not going to renew our waiver. But that matter has also been litigated already. In last year's Supreme Court Obamacare decision, the court determined by a 7-2 margin that states do not have to be coerced, that the federal government cannot coerce states into doing the Medicaid expansion with an all-or-nothing proposition. Politically, the Obama administration will put itself in a very awkward position if it attempted to not renew the waiver. It would be cutting off its liberal nose to spite the face of Arizona. After all, the administration claims that it wants to help poor people get health insurance. Even if they don't renew our waiver, even if the Supreme Court somehow allows that, we could still maintain the freeze. As Senator Biggs said, we could still maintain the freeze on enrollment, and for a very small amount of money, less than 1% of the state's general fund, we could fund the childless adults who will be on the program January 1st. And we could do that with the Prop 204 money, the only Prop 204 money, which was the tobacco settlement funds. We could do that after January 1st. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Christina Corrieri from the Goldwater Institute, and I've been asked to talk to you about why the Medicaid expansion is actually going to cost much, much more than what its proponents are telling you. So the supporters of Medicaid expansion paint a very rosy picture, promising that it's all going to be paid for by the federal government and a provider tax, and will thus not cost the Arizona taxpayers a dime. The problem is that Arizona heard all of those same promises before, and those promises were not kept. In 2000, Arizonans approved Prop 204, which expanded Medicaid to all adults below the 100% of the poverty level. At the time, Arizonans were told that Prop 204 would actually save the general fund $30 million a year. Instead, the cost projections were so off, they were wrong by over 400% for every single year of the expansion. So we're being told that with this current expansion, expansion, the cost is going to be $156 million for the first year, the year that it's free. So this is the amount that they're going to design the provider tax to raise, $156 million. The problem with that is that if they're wrong, if they are wrong by the same amount that they were wrong before, the price tag isn't $156 million, it's $600 million. So the provider tax would raise the 156, and the taxpayers can take the other $450 million. Now let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they're only half as wrong as they were before. Okay, $200 million on the general fund. That's the problem. And these erroneous cost projections, if they turn out this way again, they're not going to trigger the circuit breaker, because only two things trigger the circuit breaker: a complete repeal of Obamacare or a drop in the matching rate by the feds to under 80%. So Arizona would have a huge budget problem and no circuit breaker to save us. Moreover, the provider tax that's the linchpin for funding this whole thing has been under increasing attacks in Washington. In fact, just last week, the Simpson-Bowles Commission issued their revised budget suggestions, and one of the things that they again suggested was the elimination of the provider tax. Do you know who else has proposed limiting or eliminating the provider tax? The President of the United States, Democratic Whip Dick Durbin, House Republicans, the Senate Minority Leader. So this is something that both sides of the aisle seem to agree on, and as DC is facing increasing financial problems and is forced to make cuts, don't you think one of the cuts they're going to look at is one that's been proposed by both sides of the aisle that will save the federal government $100 million? So the problem there is, what happens if the provider tax is eliminated or limited? It doesn't trigger the circuit breaker. Remember, it's not one of those two things we talked about. So the entire cost would fall directly on the general fund. Furthermore, Washington's share for the newly eligible is never supposed to fall below 90%. Our circuit breaker doesn't kick in until they fall below 80%. So we're allowing, or some might even say inviting, the federal government to go ahead and double Arizona's cost before we even react. So in conclusion, I just want to remind you that history and common sense tell us that expanding an entitlement program is never free, and it won't be in this case either. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Petersen introduced me as a veteran. I am a retired tech sergeant in the United States Air Force.
Thank you for your service.
He also introduced me as a single mother, which I think is a dear friend's attempt to get me a date. No? Okay. So imagine, you push hard to see a specialist, and if the request is granted, you'll have to wait inordinate amounts of time for an appointment. Imagine that you have a serious medical need, and you're even scheduled and admitted to the hospital to take care of that need, but because someone has a greater need than your need for the same treatment, you're sent home. And because of limited time, or because of limited resources, that can happen time and time again until you are the one that has the greatest need. Imagine that your doctor is unable to offer the effective and reasonable treatment he'd normally recommend for your chronic conditions, and so your conditions either don't improve or they worsen because the treatment options that used to be available, they are no longer available, or they never were or will be available. There's no competition, so you're stuck with whatever care you receive. Over time, providers and staff come to understand that patients have no place else to go. And the majority exhibit everything from rudeness, burnout, and apathy to downright incompetence. They can't hear me. Okay. If you heard any of that from a patient's perspective, how does that sound? Yeah. Right. Well, that's what it looks like from a patient's perspective on government-run healthcare. And I'm not talking about Canada or some land far, far away. It's been happening right here in the United States for decades. Right here on our soil in the VA healthcare system. I know this because as a medically retired, 100% disabled Gulf War veteran, I've had to depend very heavily on the treatment arm of the Veterans Administration. Over the years, you may have heard stories about VA healthcare. Veterans who return from one form of war only to fight another, dealing with serious health issues and using a system that's painfully slow, inefficient, inconsistent, and even overburdened. Ladies and gentlemen, Obamacare is VA healthcare on steroids. Medicaid expansion is not a compromise for the overall benefit of Arizonans. It's an incremental step toward the full implementation of Obamacare. Government-run healthcare. And Arizona deserves better.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard anything else I've said, let's not let this get any further. Normally, you cannot predict the future, except in this case. The future impact of medicine in this country under Obamacare is predictable because it's already happening in VA healthcare facilities all over the nation. Thank you.
My name is State Representative Justin Olson, and I want to thank Representative Warren Petersen for putting together this press conference. I specifically want to thank him for putting this together because this is an important and complex issue. And some have framed this issue as an opportunity for Arizona to use free money from the federal government. And why would we say no to free money? And it is important for us to be able to share why we think this is a bad decision for Arizona. There are many reasons. We've heard many of them already today, and I'm going to highlight one of them that's particularly important to me. Not only will this expansion of Medicaid cost the state substantially, it will cost the federal government $800 billion over the next 10 years if all the states implement this expansion. Those are dollars that our federal government does not have. Those are dollars that over the last few months we've been trying to save through the sequestration. Every year through sequestration we will save $80 billion. Every dollar of those cuts to our military, reductions in pay to our border service, our border personnel, reductions in the air traffic control system, these meaningful cuts to get savings that we desperately need will all be evaporated with new spending in this Medicaid expansion. But that's not the only reason why I've decided not to support this expansion. Last year, I was the prime sponsor of House Bill 2800, and I was honored to be able to shepherd this bill through the legislature and get it up to the governor's desk where she signed this protection for the most innocent among us. I'm talking about those who have not yet been born. House Bill 2800 guaranteed each of us that our tax dollars would not support an entity that provides abortion on demand. But regrettably, the state was sued, and the state lost that lawsuit at the district level. The standing precedent says that we cannot prohibit these tax dollars under the Medicaid program from going to these entities that provide abortion on demand. I cannot expand the amount that we're sending of your tax dollars to Planned Parenthood and others who have this mission of terminating life before it is even born.
Thank you.
So for this reason and for the many other reasons that have been shared today, I have decided that I cannot, in good conscience, support an expansion of Medicaid that will continue to increase the amount that we're spending, that we're giving to entities that are providing abortion on demand, and that will spend our country into further debt and spending the dollars that we do not have. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Kelly Ward. I'm one of your state senators, and I have a little bit different perspective, I think, than many of the people who are here, because I have functioned in our medical system as a family physician for the last 14 years here in Arizona. And so I know that many of the things that you've already heard are completely true about the substandard care that Medicaid patients often get. Very true about having to wait very long periods of time, even if you have a physician referral to a specialist. I personally have had a patient pass away because they were unable to get care at a cardiology office because their plan refused it. this, I think, is appalling. I wanted to touch bases a little bit about the Prop 108. Remember, you're being led by the hospitals who are begging for this tax to believe that it's not really a tax. It's simply a provider assessment. A provider assessment, though, is truly a tax, and it is subject to our Prop 108 protections. Prop 108 was put in place in 1992 to protect the hard-working taxpayer. That's right. Shouldn't allow a political go-around to subvert the will of the taxpayer and subvert that protection simply because hospitals are begging for that tax to be imposed upon us. Now, you know, it seems like this is a win-win situation where hospitals want to be taxed, they want to take their money, they want to give it in so that the federal government can match their $154 million for $1.6 billion freely flowing into Arizona. You know, and that, you know, to keep those hospitals afloat. I have talked to many, many hospitals, and very, very few, despite the rise in uncompensated care, have had to have layoffs of their personnel, decreases of the services that they offer. Many actually, in fact, are actually expanding. So it seems to me that it's difficult to believe when they cry, poor me, when all those things are happening that are so much different than in every other economic sector within our state. Thank you. So if this is such a win-win situation, who are the big losers? Well, the big losers are the federal taxpayer. And remember, Arizona taxpayers are federal taxpayers. That's right. These taxpayers don't want their money to be taken and then legally laundered through the system and then given to an unelected director of an agency to spend at his whim without any legislative oversight. So the taxpayer is one loser. Number two, the other big loser are the Medicaid recipients. I will tell you that it's substandard care, as I've mentioned before. And remember, we don't have the primary care workforce that's been sold as the best kind of care. I, as a family physician, want people to have access to high-quality, cost-effective health care whenever possible. But we also have to remember that the taxpayers are the ones that are paying for this entitlement program. I also think that entitlement programs in general disincentivise the poor from improving themselves. Right now we have a fiscal cliff where people just fall right off if they make $5 or $10 too much. I'd like to see us develop an incremental system that supports people as they get out of that safety net and get back on their feet. To me, this sounds like the right thing to do, not expanding Medicaid. Now, they gave me a few extra minutes because I have two topics. I want to talk about some alternatives. I don't want to just get up here and be a naysayer that says, just don't do it. I think there are many, many things that we can do to improve the health of our citizens. Now, best case scenario would be if we could have health savings accounts and catastrophic care policies for everyone. Consumerism to get back into the healthcare arena and allow people to actually care about how much something costs whenever they're being taken care of in a hospital or a doctor's office. Something that's a little bit more timely that we could do more quickly is allow the people who are at 150% or less of the federal poverty level to access the federal exchanges and get private insurance. The private insurance is more They reimburse more to hospitals and to physicians than our Medicaid system. Our Medicaid system reimburses our providers of health care below the cost that it takes to provide that care. How can we have this slowly failing business model and expect to maintain the United States best health care in the world? We can't. One thing that's very rarely mentioned these days, it seems, is tort reform. We need to have tort reform to decrease the We also need to reform our EMTALA laws. They're federal laws. We can work on it from the state level up to the federal level to decrease the amount of people who go to the emergency room to seek care simply because they can.
Yes.
We need to define what a medical screening exam is and allow people to send people away, allow those emergency departments to send away people who do not truly have an emergency condition. Now, remember that simply increasing our Medicaid system is unlikely to improve the health of Arizonans. I will tell you that that is not going to be the case. If we just give people a card that says that they're entitled to health care, they are going to try to seek care in a primary care office. We don't have that. So where will they end up? The studies show that Medicaid recipients are more than 2 times as likely to seek care in an emergency department than people who don't have insurance or people who are privately insured. So they will flood our emergency departments, increasing cost and decreasing access to people who are truly having emergencies. Now, I want to tell you that these federal funds may sound like a gift, but it's a gift of a baby elephant. When you get a baby elephant and the federal government tells you they'll pay for it for the first 3 years, remember that when that elephant is grown up in 3 years, it's going to be Arizona's responsibility. Just this week, I heard a great lady speak on some talk radio shows, our own governor, Jan Brewer. She said that her mother told her that often the right path is not always the easy path, and I tend to agree with that. And with that, I would say we need to fight this Medicaid expansion all the way and do the right thing for Arizona.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here, to everybody who's taken time. Well, I also want to thank Representative Petersen for organizing this and every one of you for coming out to support. Listen, a lot has been said already. My objections to this bill would take more than 2 minutes that I was allotted to cover. So I'm going to focus on just 2 of them for now. And like I said, much has been said, and rightfully so, of the likelihood that this bill would steer taxpayers' funds to groups like Planned Parenthood who provide abortions. Most people, whether they are pro-life or not, do not believe that taxpayers' dollars should pay for abortions. Those that want to sound clever will claim that the dollars will go to abortion providers, but not to pay for abortions. As if though we aren't supposed to be smart enough to know that any money that goes to those groups frees up other funds to be used for abortions. This is a serious problem in this legislation. That said, even if an amendment were to be offered to fix that problem, the bill would remain a bad deal, a very bad deal for Arizona taxpayers. In exchange for a very tempting pile of money in the short term, Arizona is being asked to make a never-ending commitment of providing health care to hundreds of thousands of adults whose income levels exceed poverty levels. When the federal government eventually pulls the fiscal rug out from under our feet and leaves Arizona taxpayers holding the bag, it will overwhelm our budget here in Arizona and jeopardize every service that we provide, not just health care. Right. Now, it is worth remembering that the federal government is broke. Bankrupt. No money. No dinero. The only thing that keeps us afloat, or the only thing that keeps us going, is the fact that the feds can print more money. But printing endless quantities of money will ultimately destroy the value of our money. Let me ask you a question. Would you sign a long-term contract today with Solyndra? Because the same Washington, D.C. geniuses that brought us Solyndra are offering us this deal. We need to protect Arizona in the long term. This expansion does not do that. We need to look out for the future of our children. This expansion does not do that. And I end by saying, remember, more inflexible, government-managed, one-size-fits-all healthcare is not in the best interest of patients or taxpayers. Thank you.
My name is Tyler Boyer. I'm the chairman of the Legislative District 17 Republican Committee. And I just wanted to thank Representative Petersen for putting this together, because this is representation, folks. Today we've heard many of the reasons why expansion of Medicaid is simply an expansion of Obamacare. Make no mistake, my friends, expansion of Medicaid is an expansion of Obamacare. The sheer amount of financial incentivization that the Obama administration is throwing at the stage should just be evidence enough alone of this very fact and their grave position. The progressive socialists in the country have known this for some time, and last summer, as early as last summer, a progressive blog with the Center for American Progress has been quoted to say that the Affordable Care Act will suffer if states do not participate in the Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
This should be evidence enough alone. Medicaid expansion, or Medicaid, the program itself, has always existed as a partnership between our state and the federal government. But due to Obamacare's lack of long-term sustainability, they are desperate to place the burden on the backs of each of the programs across the 50 states, including ours here in Arizona, thus thinning the economic federal impact on the federal exchanges. It remains undisputed. Over the past 4 years, Arizonans have remained unequivocally opposed to the federal takeover of the healthcare industry. We have. 14 states have already rejected facilitating more of the Obamacare burden on their own citizens. Today, Arizona has the opportunity to reignite faith in our communities and to join the grassroots conversation being had across the country about rejecting Obamacare and together a more positive message of restoring freedom. What does restoring freedom mean? Restoring freedom by limiting government. Restoring freedom through lower taxes. Restoring freedom as we protect the sanctity of life. Restoring freedom in personal responsibility, and wouldn't you know, allowing Arizonans to exercise their God-given rights to choose the best healthcare options. Not from the worst. Without robbing our children, and our children's children, and our children's children's children. This means a lot to me because I'm a 7th generation Arizonan. And if my parents did this to me, I'd be really upset. But our children's children, and also, not intruding on their own personal liberties. We also must maintain our home state's ability to self-govern.
Yes.
We can't do that without a fund, our own general fund. So, I think I represent many of my colleagues, if not all, in the Republican Party, legislative district chairman, many of you wonderful precinct committeemen who are here today, which is the most important elected position in the state, to continue to oppose, not just start to oppose, but we've been continuing to oppose the expansion of Obamacare and the implication of a further disastrous course that the federal government is on, and to stand up valiantly with the majority of Americans in this positive battle of restoring freedom.
What about the pharmaceutical companies?
Restoring freedom against Obamacare. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. It's been a great panel of people. I really appreciate and respect everyone who's spoken. We've covered a lot of topics. I want to just close with a few more comments. So Dr. Kelly Ward, Senator Ward, did a fantastic job talking about a lot of options that we have. We have lots of options. In fact, when we give people the freedom to use their own money, and there's 6.5 million people in Arizona, we give people 6.5 million different options. So there's lots of options out there. How about this option? Say no to the expansion of Obamacare. The second thing we can do is that we can cover
individuals from 100% to 138% of the FPL, rather than shoving them into Medicaid, they can go onto an exchange. It's almost virtually free health insurance, but at least they're paying something. This encourages self-reliance. This creates better coverage at a lower cost. And third, we're not done down here. We have a purpose down here as a legislature, right? Let's keep passing laws that support free market principles, that will create competition and give people more choices and promote self-reliance. And finally, we have been told that our Medicaid program is the very best program in the nation. Now, why is that? Because we were the very last to come on board, and we watched everybody botch theirs. So let's not be hasty here. Even if the expansion team is correct, even if they were correct, let's not rush into this. The expansion will be there tomorrow. It would be foolish to jump into this thing. We've already heard that Obamacare is beginning to unravel. Even the pro-expansion side, if you watch one of the last interviews that they had, they admitted they think Obamacare is going to implode. Yes. Should we go ahead and build that third story on that two-story building that's collapsing? Now, finally, what can you do to help? Well, first of all, you can work with your legislative districts to fight the expansion. If you're not a precinct committeeman, become one. Second, enter the discussion. The reporters that are here are going to post a story, but they're so kind they leave a whole bunch of space on the bottom for you to finish and help them. Imagine what would happen if every single one of you went home today and posted on what you saw here today. Third and most important, this is the most important thing you can do to fight the expansion. If the Obamacare expansion doesn't pass the Senate, it doesn't pass. If the Obamacare expansion doesn't pass the House, it doesn't pass. Meet with your legislators and make sure you have a solid no vote from them. And Obamacare expansion will not happen in Arizona. We have a choice. More socialism and bigger government, or more freedom and fiscal stability. I choose freedom. Okay, we have several people here that you can come ask questions.
Oh, no, we'd like at the microphone for all of us. First off, you just said you want Obamacare to go away, you don't believe in it, but you're 138% of the exchanges are Obamacare. You're saying to go into the exchanges, and that's part of the Affordable Care Act. So how can you say you hate it, but go here instead?
The Supreme Court has made this decision. They said you are not forced to expand Obamacare. So what I said was an option, rather than pushing people into Medicaid, is being able to go into the exchange, purchase health insurance from the exchange, where they get virtually free health insurance. It's better insurance because it's private, and at least they're paying something. They only pay 2% of their total income, but at least it's something. And so when it's Medicaid, when you have free health care, completely free, how often are you going to use that? I know for me, I have had dire death situations, and I didn't want to call the ambulance because I didn't want to pay that $3,000 bill. I drove myself down to the hospital. Other people, they get a cold, they go to the hospital 3 times a month in the ambulance with a cold. Okay, that's a broken motivation.
Second question is, the Centers for Medicaid Services came out today with a set of rules that appears to say that they are not going to match the expansion population whatsoever at the end of the year. The Senate President said we could pay for that population with our rainy day fund, but there's not enough money in there for his 3 years.
For Prop 204, we will do exactly what we told the voters we would do and what they voted for. They said to pay for the 204 population with the tobacco settlement funds and with available and with the available funds from the legislature. That's what we'll do. One more question, please.
How many people will you fund? How many people? Will you fund the entire existing population? And how much is that
We will do exactly what we told the Arizona people we would do.
Tell us right now exactly what you're going to do. How many and at what cost?
We will do exactly what the voters asked us to do.